understand, first of all, I'm a very earnest person, so I kind of get into this stuff, and I get really excited. And combined with also being a maximalist, sometimes things get a little overwhelming. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming at you, but I'm going to go pretty quickly in the presentation side. And I'm going to show some images. I just have so many images, there's no way I can get through them in an hour anyways. So I developed some strategies that we're going to work through. I'm going to show you, enough to understand and get a grasp of what I'm talking about with each of the projects. And then I'm going to leave enough time after the talk for a lot of questions. And at that point, if you're interested to see some more images of certain projects or to hear a little bit more detail about my process or how I come to some of the concepts, that would be a good opportunity to do that. So this is going to be very much a performance. I do plan sometimes, but I never quite know what I'm going to say or do until I've actually done it already. I'm like, oh wow, I just said that. Okay, that's cool. So it's going to be fun. I brought some things to show you. A lot of what I would have brought to show you is actually on display. I have a small solar show at USF St. Petersburg campus right now, and that show is connected to a commission, a large sculpture that the school commissioned me, and that recently was completed. So I have a show up, and that project is what I'm going to focus our talk around today. And here's some. There's an image, you may have seen this. So this is what I'm going to kind of focus the talk around today as a way to kind of show you a glimpse into the process of how I work from start to finish. So this particular project has a lot of different stages to it, and a strong component to the project itself was educational, since it was at the school. So the motivation of the school to bring artists onto the campus is so that the artists can interact with the students in different courses. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. First of all, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I was born in Florida. I grew up in St. Petersburg. And I live with my wife and son, my wife Maggie and son Cedar, who they're here. You're going to hear a lot from him. He really likes to sing. But he doesn't, I don't know how long, he doesn't really pay attention to me for too long. So we're going to hear a nice soundtrack, and it'll just be part of it. As long as he can stay in here, it's great. So we live in St. Petersburg. We also have family land that we purchased from my grandparents in Gulf Hammock, Florida. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that as we go through it, because that place out in the country is very pivotal to how I kind of was formed and how I see the world and my place in it. And so a lot of my work has kind of come out of exploring those woods, almost as if this 6-acre parcels and all the land that I trespass around it to explore the world and the swamps and stuff. It's kind of like my lens. It's like my little kind of cosmos to kind of understand the broader universe. So we're going to be talking about that. So that's kind of a little bit about my art background. I graduated from college in 2000. So since then, I worked a lot in galleries, and I've done curating. I used to be the curator at Studio 620 in St. Petersburg. But in the past 3-4 years, I've been focusing as much as possible just on my art. I still do some art handling work. But so I've been trying to do as much as I can I'm at the point in my life where I'm ready to just give it all I got. So that's what we're doing here. And so I've shown a lot in the area over the past couple of years. I received the 2017 Emerging Artist Grant from Creative Pinellas, and last year I received a grant from the City of St. Pete, the Arts Alliance, so that was really cool. I've been a finalist for some really big public art projects, so I was really excited to for this one to work out, and I was going to tell you a little bit about how that happened. Right now I have a show, part of a group show at Yale University at the Divinity And what I'm working toward, in addition to what I have at USFSP, and I'm working toward a solo show at HCC Gallery 3, which is in the Dale Mabry campus. I'm going to have a solo show there in the summer, which I'm really excited about. So I've been building a lot of work, and my brain right now is very much in that stage of trying to develop that, so I had to kind of like pull my brain out of that. And now I got to talk to much people, which is great. So I'm a little bit here and there. So one more thing. So the other day, I'm going to do a little name dropping here, but I had the opportunity, I was at a gathering to speak with Akiko Kutani. She has a really cool exhibition along with Nate DeVeard and another artist at the Lieber Radler Museum right now. And I ran into her and Babs Reingold, who is she's a pretty well-known artist in St. Pete. And so Akiko was like, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of a conceptual artist, kind of a sculptor." And Babs is like, "You know, you're a sculptor, you do installation art," and they're like, "You gotta learn how to answer that question." But for me, it's always like I gotta figure out like who I'm talking to and all this context, and you know. So that's something maybe you guys can help me figure that out today. How about that? But yeah, so we'll discuss more about what I actually do, and we'll kind of figure out how to summarize that maybe. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about a brief history and how the project at USF developed. We're going to talk about then the process of how that piece was made. I'm going to show you some behind the scenes, let you in on the mystery a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about what, kind of conclude it with some of my motivations, like what's inspiring me, what drives me, what is the calling that I feel that drives me to make this artwork. And then kind of goals to that. And I'm on zone here. So this talk is going to be based on presentations that I gave at USF St. Pete on campus. And so I'm going to kind of develop that a little bit. So we're going to start with, thank you. I'm going to try to stand in front of it as much as I can. Stand up the side here. Is everyone, am I blocking anyone? Okay, great. So I worked with Ann White Kell, she runs that department of spaces, places, and art on campus. Now, Ann used to be she's been involved with lots of different organizations in this area. She used to be the kind of head art czar for St. Petersburg. So I met her through the studio, and she invited me to be a part of another public art project on campus, and that didn't really work out. But so I invited her to the show that I did in fall of 2017 at the Moraine Arts Center. And at that show, I was exploring a new body of work called Paths of Consumption. So I'm going to show you some of the. I'm going to show you just some of the images, and then we're going to talk about what it is and why it is. So this will just give you a little bit of. We're going to talk about what it's made out of. So she saw this, and she said, "You know, I think maybe we have a space for you. I think we're not done with you yet." So the campus, the identity of the campus, they have some kind of like some core mission statements, and one of them is very connected to sustainability. So the campus has done a lot of work toward making the campus as sustainable as it can be, and there's a lot of student organizations on the campus that are very motivated and interested in this. So there was a nice crossover. So this project, it has kind of a scientific edge to it as well, and so it could be kind of seen as science fringes, and also. It's very much driven, the motivation and the concept, by concepts around caring for the environment and sustainability. And so she saw that as a good match. So we developed the project. It took a long time, but we developed it. And then this past fall, I started giving presentations to actual classes. I didn't actually talk to any art classes, which was really interesting. I spoke with an environmental economics class. I spoke with a marketing class. I spoke with a geography class about kind of map making, the human footprint. And so all these classes I talked to, each one I kind of had to find the right path to find the connection to what they were studying. And so in each class it became an interesting conversation where I felt like I was getting something out of it too, because I was seeing what I was doing from their perspective, and it kind of deepened it, expanded it. So that was pretty exciting. So it became like a mutual educational experience. Let's see what we got here. So it was very much a cross-discipline project. And part of the concept of the project, my initial concept was to involve the students somehow in the actual making of it. So actually collaborating and coming up with the concept and the ideas. And so what ended up happening is after the class presentations, I invited students. So each class, a few students participated, and what I did is I took them on campus nature tours, and I'm going to show you a couple of images in a bit, to kind of like show them how I see the world on their particular space. And several of them, I took them to different locations, different ecosystems on campus, and garden spaces, and they're like, I didn't know this was here. So it was pretty exciting, and so then I was able to actually, with each of those spaces, I was able to actually find a specimen in each of those spaces that actually connected directly to the project we were doing. So that was pretty exciting. So before I get into what happened when we did those, when I interacted with the students, we're going to come back to that. So I'm going to take you on a little journey of how this project came to be. What were the concepts behind it, and how it developed to turn into like this large-scale project. So first of all, just so you have a context, I'll show you the last time we were at the cabin. I'll just show you a little video. So this is the kind of the Florida swamp. This is a hammock swamp, kind of on the nature coast of Florida. See, here's the cabin. It's the cabin. He really likes the cabin. He talks about it every day. So yeah, surrounded by swamp. My grandfather. So it's going to come back around. See this cabin here. My grandfather built this cabin around the time I was born. He got the land and he actually harvested the trees, and he built it pretty much all himself. And so I grew up coming here. This has always been like this. It's always been like the foundational place. So I always come back there. And I realized recently I was reading a book, and I realized it's almost a mysterious connection. It's almost like this kind of spiritual, mysterious connection to this space. Something I realized the language for recently. I was reading a book, and the author was talking, or the character was talking about how this place that she was drawn to go back to, she was contemplating why that was, why she wanted to be in this space. And what she described was that what she realized is like when she is in this space, she is most connected to her true self. So it's like the version of yourself that seems most authentic to you, and the version that seems like the best version, the most connected to the world, the most connected to yourself. That's kind of like, as an adult, that's what I get from being here. And through my work, I hope to encourage other people to find those spots if you don't have them, and to get the most out of it and enjoy and be grateful for the spots you do have to really connect in a deep way to the world around you.
Very nice. Very nice.
Oh, thank you.
I said.
And anyone can say, you can stop me, ask me to, yeah, that's good. just kept doing things to it. It was a feral cement boat. There was like cement. It's crazy. Yeah. But it did float, but it was too heavy, so it couldn't really steer. So, but it was pretty amazing. It was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen as a kid, and I got to go hang out in it all the time. But he made it in the woods, so it was kind of like what I envisioned, like Noah's Ark or something. So it was always like, and after it sat in the river and the hurricane came through and kind of pulled it into the shore, and it ended up sinking, and it's still there. There's like a hole that's still there, and you can see it when you fly over. I flew over in a Cessna once, and I could see it. It was really cool. But yeah, so it was 53 foot long by 3 stories tall. And the top story was the pilot house. And inside the pilot house, it was surrounded by windows and these cushions, like a nice sofa. And my mother, she's the one that made the couch, and she sewed the cushion covers. And so years after it started to decay and rot, I went out there on the canoe with my friend, and I was just, it was like falling apart. I was like, wow, this is really interesting and sad, but also like really bizarre and cool and affecting. And I noticed this piece of fabric. It looked about like this when I saw it. And but the reason why I noticed it is because it had these black lines all over it. I'm going to pass it around in a second so you can examine it. And so I just ripped off a section of it, and I kept it. And I kind of kept it for years. And then I would pull it out every once in a while. So it looked like this. And what I did is, you can see the patterns here. This is the lines that I saw. So what I did is I traced those lines with red paint and like permanent pen, and then I painted all that wasn't the pattern. And that took me. I worked on that for probably about 5 years, and it took months of my life. Not like it took, not that it took me, months to make. It literally, if you added up all the hours that I spent on it. And so I listened to a lot of books while I did this, and I just thought, I meditated, and I really thought about the patterns, and I started becoming very interested in chaos theory and fractals. And so this piece is called, I usually hang it on the tapestry, it's called The Flag of the World. And so this piece kind of started me on a new kind of way of thinking about the world and how we'll start here and just go around. It kind of got me started to notice patterns all around me. And it started to get me to think about like the things beneath the surface. But also, it started to get me to think about scales, because what fractals are. Is anyone familiar with fractal, that term fractal?
Oh, yeah.
How would you describe a fractal?
Shapes that have pattern unexpectedly.
Okay. I like that. That's the first time I've heard it framed that way. That's good.
Just pop right out.
That's good. And another characteristic of fractal imagery is that there is a similarity to that shape, to that design across scale. So these images, these lines, if you were to look at close up to your capillaries, it looked like that. It would have that same pattern. If you were to fly high in an airplane and look down at the Mississippi River basin, it would look the same. So there's these networks of these patterns that are all through the universe, and they've even conceived. I'm going to go out a little bit here, but they even conceived that they've kind of theorized what if you were looking outside the universe, what it would look like. And it looks like a giant fractal of all these strings of galaxies connected. And so it's very fascinating. You can take it as far as you want. I take it to the extreme every time. So that's just what I do. So I started noticing these patterns everywhere. And as I was saying, so if you can see this here, this piece here, and this piece here. So as I was starting to adjust to and become aware of the things around me, I tell this story, which is probably a myth, but it's how I remember it. Picking up this wood from the firewood pile and going to throw it in the fire at the cabin, and the bark falling off. And the bark falls off and reveals this pattern, which I later went in and painted. I was like, what is this? Like, whoa, like this is like on the thing that I'm just throwing in the fire. So, which is really cool, but then also, then every single time I go to throw a piece of wood in the fire, I'm like, oh wait, is there beautiful art on it? At some point, you just gotta have a fire. So I started noting, I'm gonna hand, this is one that that isn't on display at USF, so I'm gonna hand this around. So I started noticing these patterns on logs and sticks. And I'll go back real quick. So, and then as a result of seeing this all the time, my eyes started to just notice them more and more and more. And one day I was inside the cabin, and I'm like looking around, and I realized, so this is the interior of the cabin, you can see all the logs. Basically every single log in the cabin has these patterns that I found on a piece of firewood. But, and then I spent my entire childhood in this space, and it's just part of the background. And so, then everything started to become foreground, which is really overwhelming, but it's also exciting. But it's kind of hard to live there all the time. So I started to, yes?
Is this caused by the wood boring thing?
Look at you. Look at you.
Woo!
You got an A. Well, A minus, you said thing.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great. So what I discovered, there's many different types of insects whose larva lives and develops in plants and trees. And so you can see here this form here, and I'll come back to that. But yeah, so you see these forms here. What happens is the adult beetle, I don't know what it looks like. There's all different types. Lays these eggs inside here, and then so this is a record. This is these paths, these lines is a record of the history of these creatures and their time inside this tree. And so you see, it's like this whole community, this whole family, and they're all going off in their own direction.
Family tree?
What's that?
A family tree?
Hey, that's good. That's the title of my next piece. Yeah. So I started to notice these, and you know, I get excited, and I tell people about stuff. And so people started to notice as well, and they started sending me things. So my brother-in-law sent me this. I'm going to start with this one in the back. Sorry.
No wonder your mind is busy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the wife about that. Make sure I'm on course here. So I started to see all of these things I was finding, specimens I was finding in nature as actual art making materials, because I wanted to explore these things anyways. So I started to. I'm going to show you kind of some examples. So first of all, I started kind of enhancing the actual specimen, kind of bringing out the pattern. And remember this one, you're going to see it in a second. Well, I can just do it right now, like that. So this piece is actually on display at USFSP right now. But so that's 4 by 4 feet. And that is that's hand cut out of plywood. The jigsaw, yeah. Again, the meditation, and that meditation became focused on what these patterns were. What are these paths? So you see, so I started to. So here's a map. Here's a map of that's what golf hammock is. It's right off of 19. So not gonna give you the address though. So I took this pattern and I cut out the map and laid it over top of this anatomy drawing. So I'm just kind of exploring what these patterns are, what's the significance, what draws me to them. And this image is this is an image where I took before my youngest sister was born. Hi Annie. She's here with her sons Oliver and Elliot. Hey guys, sitting nicely. So I took images from my childhood. This is my older sister, and and the sister beneath me, Rachel and Heidi, and then I took the same size image of myself, and I cut that pattern out of it, and then so I removed it, and so I'm over both of them, and just kind of exploring like how we are shaped by those around us, and how our experience with the people that we love, the people we're closest to, like have such a profound impact on who we are and who we become. And just kind of exploring, kind of deconstructing through these patterns I found that were made by insects, kind of deconstructing my own identity, my own, like trying to figure out like who I really am. And, so where's okay, so that the piece that's being passed around now, I have an image of it. Oh, there it is. So this is the piece that my brother-in-law sent me, and it's just a really unique, it's just a beautiful piece. And so I had that for years too, and one day I was looking at it, it was like, and I painted it, and what I did is I spray painted the whole thing, and then I scratched away everything that wasn't in didn't fall in the grooves. And so, that piece, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you, Dr. So that piece became this 20-foot long sculpture of like 50 different pieces cut out, hand cut out of plywood.
Stop it.
Yeah, it's early. So what I ended up exploring, this is also called the expanding universe. So to go quickly over a couple things that what the significance of it. So the passive consumption idea is that the only record we have of these creatures, the only reason why we know that they were here at all, is because of what they left behind, what they consumed. So their record, their map of their history is recorded in what they have consumed, like what they have made of the world around them. And so so through this process, I started thinking about how I move through the world, like what path am I forging? How am I consuming? And so it becomes like this conversation about how to consume better, how to move through the world better, because we have to consume to live. I mean, that's just you just couldn't exist otherwise. But it's complicated. It's a complicated thing. So for me, it takes conceptual art to explore it, and then it becomes a conversation without necessarily having to come to a dualistic conclusion, right or wrong, or this or that. It's more like it's both, and it's complicated, but it's worth talking about and it's worth growing with. And so that was kind of how this project developed. And so when Anne came to see this, she's like, yeah, I think this can work well. And so my previous experience on campus, I knew that there was a big pile of oak trunks that were left over from the construction of the new school of business on campus, which is an amazing building. And I did several class presentations here. But, and so I thought, oh, this will be perfect. Here's the inner workings of my computer here. Yeah, there it is. So I was like, okay, great. So I'll take the students on these walks around the campus, and we'll go to this pile of oaks, and we'll trace patterns there, and we'll make the same sculpture, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. And so I talk to the classes, and I get students to participate, and they make this a little bigger. And so we're looking at it, and so what she's holding right there is a piece of bark, and I'm going to pass two around both directions this time. So you can see, look closely, you can see the pattern that is revealed. Yes. So what you see in these is not what we saw here. Unfortunately, it was too decayed by this point to make any usable image. And so we started on our walks through campus, looking at things, taking pictures. Oh, and we did a little exercise which was fun, where each one of them showed me the path they had made on campus that day. Kind of like sketched it out with their hand to think about like how that moved through campus. So I took them on like all these ecosystems, there's beautiful gardens. And so these images that you're seeing here, super organized, you can see. So yeah, so we're looking at things. Get back here, there we are. And what I did find is something that I've also worked with quite a bit. You guys like looking at things? You guys? You like it?
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to get crazy. Oh, by the way, here's the tracing of that log that's going around. So I traced it because it's round, so I had to trace it to make it flat. So it took a long time.
It's just by looking at it and then.
No, I want to be as faithful to the original pattern as possible.
Yeah.
That's because it's just, I don't know what that is about me, but there's always translation involved. There's always interpretation to make it work in this context. So that's been an interesting exercise. And those, I don't know how they just go around somehow. They'll just weave their way around. It'll be a nice path. There you go. So, what we did find, where'd they go? Does anyone know what this is? Let me go over here to the light.
Oh.
Man, those are really great things. This is a really tiny fly that is called a leaf miner. Yeah. It's a leaf miner fly. Well, at least the larvae are these leaf miners, because this is what they do. So what they do is they lay their larvae in between the two layers of the leaf, and they just eat all the good stuff in the middle. And you can see where the path starts.
Yeah.
You can see where the path starts here. And what's happening? What's happening here? What can we tell about the process? Well, it's getting bigger and bigger as it's eating more and more. And so it's developing, and then what happened here?
She exploded.
It exploded. Yeah, it transformed into a fly. And it flew away. So what we have here is a record of this stage of its life. And I started to see this, and as you're passing it around, you'll see that I've done a lot of work with these things. So this is a pattern I traced on a leaf, which is really cool because you can actually see the shape of. You can tell it's a leaf, so you can see the context from which it came.
I get to keep this one.
Extended loan. And so I started to see these patterns as a metaphor. A metaphor for like how to reflect on our own stages of life. And so this here, there's 4 separate patterns here. And so I use this to kind of explore the idea that I have 3 siblings, 3 sisters. And so it's like, these are all tracings of me and my family, me and my sisters. And so there's 4 of us here, there's 4 patterns here, and you can kind of see, it's almost like the shape of our house. You know, so it's like this is an expression of like our childhood and how like our paths are so like wrapped up in each other and so affected by each other. And so I started seeing these. Let's start here. So then I did the same thing with kind of different stages of my life. You can see these different images. I'm going to start back here again. So I started to see it as even a metaphor for instance, for my Instagram, just because. So you see, it became. So you see these images here, these 7 separate designs, and this form here. Well, here's me giving a talk to some of the class. Reception. So I'm going to come back to this. Here's an image of the show that's at USF right now. So all of these were the result of my interactions on campus with students. So this form here, and this form here were images that were shot by students, taken by students of leaf miner patterns found on campus on our tours. These 4, this one, and this one, were created by the students. I challenged them. I was like, think about, meditate on your own experience. Meditate on how you move through the world. Meditate on your own paths, like recurring paths. And so they all took it kind of a different direction. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that narrative, a little bit about their stories. So the first student, she chose to take the long view, the big picture. And so this path represents the last 10 years of her life. Kind of starting up, I'll show you here. Starting when she moved from Alabama with her family down to the east coast of Florida. And she went to school here. She grew up, went to school, and then she transferred to, I'm inviting you all to imagine here. So she went to USFSP, she transferred to USF, and then her last semester, the semester that I met her and talked with her, she was having to commute to Daytona Beach. So that was very present in her mind, like the scale of her path, and that. So she kind of took that view. Another student, Nina, she actually is engaged in a really cool independent art project on campus of her own, where she, every day when she's on campus, she goes to the beach that's on campus. We'll just have to keep going, sorry. Not enough time. So she goes to the beach on campus and she picks up little pieces of colored plastic. And she goes, because if you all have never seen the campus there, it's really nice. It's right on the water. It's right downtown by the airport and by the marina, by the old Dolly Museum. And so she picks up this plastic, and what she's doing is she's sorting it all, and she's making art out of it. She's making like mosaic art out of the. So I'll show you some of the painting of it here. So. One of the students, so her path is just her experience on campus, like kind of her general experience on campus, which she's like going all over the place. She's going up staircases to the second floor, coming down the staircases, and so she had really fun with it, a lot of fun. And then another student, he chose to do a path through his neighborhood of his running path every day. And when he submitted it to me, I was like, you run by, like, the guys I work with, you run by their house every day. I was like, oh, okay. And they actually were able to meet at the opening reception, which was cool. This pattern here, this was taken by one of the students. She was probably the youngest one involved. And what she chose to do, through our conversation, she became really interested in the experience of the leaf miner. So kind of seeing the world through the eyes of this insignificant little insect larva. And so what she did is she actually took this and she took that image and she placed it. She placed it over. You can't really see it, but I can show you afterwards. But so she placed it up on a Google map of her neighborhood, and it kind of had to interpret it to get the angles in there and everything. And so she went on a bike ride, following this path. And when she sent it to me, I was really surprised because she actually went by my house. She went by our house. So it's just this bizarre connections. So this is really exciting. So those individual paths kind of the wide range of development, experience, all the different perspectives, beliefs, understandings. And so they're all blended together and overlapped. You can see some at different stages of development. And that's a really, so the guy that did his running path, he shoots film, and so he shot this film when the camera got messed up. So it's just really cool double exposure to that. So that was fun. So, this piece here is 16 feet long by 7 feet tall, and so each of these you can kind of get the size of those. So I can so real quick, I'm just gonna give us 10 minutes of questions. But real quick, I'm gonna I kind of gave you the whole rundown of how it was made through the other project. How do you choose your colors? Yeah, that's going to be your first question. That's going to be the first question. That's going to be great. Okay, so in closing, so part of my motivation, this is kind of how I close my presentations to the classes, is that for me, what motivates me is to be able to learn about and explore the universe around me, the world around me. But then what I'm really passionate about is then getting to share what I discover and what I come to understand in my time doing that. And so it becomes very much this idea that I also am very interested in using natural materials and things that I find. Almost everything that I use is something that has decayed or died. It's like now it's overlooked. Like there's no value to it. And so I find these things and I give them value, whether it's a pattern or like a specimen, a piece of driftwood. I give it value. I make it into something that it wasn't. I try to explore its best potential. And part of my motivation for doing that, especially in the context of this project about how to be more sustainable, is that I think a big problem for this conversation is that more and more we're becoming disconnected, especially the younger generation, becoming disconnected from the world around us. We're becoming disconnected from the physical spaces, the natural beauty that are literally all around us. We walk on the ground with like this kind of endless potential of like beauty that's happening on that scale. And then to look at the trees, even one tree has the potential to understand so much about the universe and about ourselves if you have the eyes to see it. And so a lot of my motivation is to help people get to know the world around them by showing kind of extreme versions of what's overlooked by them every day and the potential beauty that's there to get to know the space around them, because you can eventually grow to love what you know, and you're going to then care for what you love. And so the conversation, it can't be this argument about what should we do. It's more like let's encourage a personal love for the beauty and the wonder that's around us. And so that's kind of like what I tried to get across in the presentation and in this piece to the campus. So yeah, so that's the talk. So, first question. The colors. They're a bit extreme. Not very natural, right? Very good, the colors. So, part of what motivated me, and we'll go back to this one. Oh, it's okay, you can leave it. If you want, yeah, that's great, thank you. So, I became very interested in, through different books and just through different research, I became very interested in how we observe things at the scale, things that aren't visible to the naked eye. And so we're dependent on the technology we've developed over the years to even be able to know a majority of what we know about our universe. There had to be technology that was developed. And so, like for instance, the Hubble telescope. Those images, you guys all seen images of like the nebulae, you know? So a lot of those images are created by what's called false color technique. And what the false color, nice. I love it. It's exaggerated. It's not real in the sense that if we looked at it through a telescope, we wouldn't. But they take all these separate images and they layer them, all these different perspectives and views, and they layer them to get what's called a false color image. But it really is kind of like ecstatically real, so it's almost more true than reality. That's how I see it. And the same for the smallest things we can observe, like electron micrographs and stuff. It uses this technology where it's imaging things in such a way where it uses these bright colors to accentuate and to be able to reveal what the actual nature and character of these forms are. And so I just like how it looks. I started doing this, exploring this color palette after my son was born. It's just something clicked, and I started working on a much larger scale and with much brighter colors, like I became a kid or something. And so I was like, I saw the world like everything was like, man, just huge. And so I started taking the little patterns that I was working with at like X-Acto knives and blowing them up to a human scale, and then painting them at kind of like a cosmic scale. But the motivation beyond the aesthetic is that it represents kind of this multi-layered, kind of this multiplicity of perspectives and understandings. So you layer all these different ways of seeing the world to make a truer representation for all of us to see. So one perspective only gives you so much. But when you layer them all, and it's like mysterious and it's complicated, and it's complex, and it's crazy. That's okay. Yes?
Your application of color, that's not by brush, is that
No,
spray
it's
paint?
spray paint. So part of the motivation of using spray paint, especially in this piece, is I wasn't interested in the control. I wasn't interested in like painstakingly I wanted to explore and I wanted it to be revealed to me. So I used a method where I had the least amount of control. Spray paint. It's just like shh. But I still was able to create like a really interesting palette. So yeah, I want to leave it open for chaos and to be surprised. And also at the scale that I'm working on, it's just more practical. Hey buddy.
Yeah.
How you doing? You have a question? Oh wow. He was there. He was there.
Kenny,
Yes.
so while this is on display, is there a description that a viewer can just walk up and understand what you're presenting?
Yes and no. So the stick was actually sitting in the corner here. Hey buddy. Use my helper. Can you take this one, buddy? Take this one. Okay. So I use one of my strategies that I use, because a lot of my work is very conceptual. So one of my strategies that I use is in the titles, in the medium section, it's very descriptive. And so it'll say, for instance, in this piece, it'll say like found beetle larva path traced and reproduced at a larger scale, and the stick is over in the corner. So it takes investigation. So, but if you're interested, you're like, what? You know, and you'll be like, oh wow, okay. So it's there, but I also want it to stand alone and be mysterious and kind of be striking for the work of art itself, rather than just an analog to something else. So finding this balance is something I'm still working on. Is finding this balance. The piece I did for the school, you notice you could see a very clear outline of relief. That was important to me, just so it would be more accessible for everyone that would happen upon it, and not just people interested in or aware of conceptual art. So,
When you say you spray that stick, do you then have to go back and remove some of the paint?
yeah, I removed all the paint that wasn't in the group.
In the group.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I really love tedious things.
Sandpaper?
No, exactly not.
I was just going to say, this show at Memorial, when you've got a picture of it, but on the right-hand side, there's an opening,
Yeah.
and you walk into Memorial, and there's still another room,
Yeah.
a gallery, and you saw that from quite a distance. And
Oh, you
that's
said-
all you
yeah.
can see is
Yeah.
that wall. It was very
Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah.
And you had to go in and look and see what it was.
Yeah, I really wanted to draw into it. Yeah. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Cool.
For the short time I've been following you, I've seen a lot of natural products, texture, and shadows.
because you don't see what's happening here and there. You just see, like the form you do see, you see how the colors are connected, but so much of what is the piece is about is what isn't there. So the reason, and so the way I approached this was rather than reproducing the void, I inverted it, and I made the trail that was left the positive. So I made it out of wood because the actual creatures were what they had consumed was the wood. So this is kind of like our version of beetle larva poop, basically. Plywood, you know. So
You knew it could be so beautiful.
it's all what you do with it and how you see it. And one quick thing I wanted to say real quick about the ABI. So conceptually, what also was striking to me after I made this, and when I started talking to Anne about the project at the school, was the fact that the piece is very concerned with this idea of consumption and how to like be in the world in a better way. But it became this kind of like paradoxical kind of irony to me that I used plywood and spray paint. And so, because typically I'm using repurposed materials. Almost all my work is made, when I make frames and boxes, it's all repurposed materials. Like the glass, everything. So I did a whole exhibition of just found repurposed materials. And so for this work's different because I'm actually purchasing stuff. But if you want to build something, what do you do? Where do you go? If you want to build something, if you're making something, where do you go to do that? You go to Home Depot, right? So the alternative takes a lot of work and knowledge and know-how. So I became aware of this idea, this kind of paradox where we all have to consume, but I started thinking about, well, I've heard a lot about iPhones and like how they're made and what happens to them after done, and it's very questionable how good it is for other people in other countries and how good it is for the environment. And I drive a car all the time, and I use AC, and so I started thinking about it, and everyone's talking about how red meat is bad because all the methane from the cow, and so I started thinking about like all of these things that we all engage in every day because that's where we find ourselves at this point in history with how we move through the world. And so rather than making it some sort of didactic about how everyone's doing it wrong, I want it to be more about an engagement of like this idea of like this acknowledgement of the complexity of the issue and like an opening to a conversation about how to work through it together. Yeah. So that's
Great.
I absolutely.
cool.
What have you done with the surfaces that you put that on and spray paint?
Trying to get a little Right now there's a big pile of plastic that I put down in my yard I need to deal with. But yeah, I reuse as much as I can. So
But I mean, the patterns that show up there
yeah,
could be
yeah,
interesting.
I think so.
I like Avatar.
Real quick, so obviously the artwork is up at USFSP campus. So if you're ever in St. Pete, in addition, there's a bunch of other public artwork there as well. It's really worth checking out.
In which building is it?
My work is outside of Davis Hall, which is kind of by Albert Whitted across from the coffee shop. So it's right there. I showed you some of the resources where you can see my work. I have my website, kennyjensen.com. I have an Instagram, it's Kenny Jensen Artist. And I also have a Patreon page, which various stages in my practice has been very helpful to me. It helps kind of cover my studio rental and kind of just studio expenses. So if any of you are interested in that, checking that out, that's cool. That's Patreon, Kenny Jensen. But yeah, so there's a